Okay, so I just thought I'd show you, if you're not already aware, of the free Navionics chart viewer, which is available online via their website. I tend to use this a little bit sort of in the early stages. If I'm considering doing a trip or something like that, even if it's just along the coast, I sometimes play around with this just to get a brief idea of distances involved. And sort of like navigational, main navigational hazards, all that sort of stuff. Give me an idea of what I'm, potentially gonna be up against. So I'm just going to show you how where to find it and how to use it really. So it's online, www.navionics.com, and the first thing you'll see is obviously their main web page. They've got the products available for anyone who's got subscriptions or devices using the Navionics software. There's all sorts of bits and pieces. You've got the features tab. If you've got an account already, you can get access through there and manage your subscriptions through that. And then the free chart viewer is up here as well. So select that, and that will bring up your overview there, like you'd have on your chart plotter or on your app or what have you. That's what you get. And as you zoom in, you can see that you've got some pretty detailed resolution of the sort of depths. You've got sandbanks, a few buoys there, obviously your wind farms, all that pretty important stuff. And these depths obviously, as you normally have on a plotter, a chart datum. I think on the app they actually that you pay for, these depths actually change in respect to the tidal height at the time. So, but I tend to turn that off because I always like to know what chart datum is and work it out roughly what's going on in my head. So, but this is really something that you'd only really use just for playing around with. Really, I mean, I wouldn't base unless it was only a small little trip. I wouldn't base a big trip on planning that I've done using this, but it's still a good a tool to use if you just want to work out sort of the rough sort of time taken, etc., and even just to practice in theory a sort of chart planning skill, if you like. But always use for your actual planning. Always use Admiralty charts or IMRAE charts with a decent sort of resolution. So yeah, what I was gonna kind of just show is just a kind of a virtual plan of a trip from Harwich to Ramsgate. It's something that this whole area is an absolute, as you can see, it's an absolute bloody mess of navigational hazards. You've got sandbanks and wind farms, deep water channels. Obviously, you're gonna have some shipping coming down here, so that's something always to be aware of. The main Felixstowe or Harwich VTS sort of zone runs around here, and then you've got sort of a TSS area which brings in some of the big cargo vessels from the channel into the Port of Felixstowe. So a lot of activity around this area as they're brought in under pilot and then up into the Orwell alongside the quay there at Felixstowe. Obviously lots of shallow areas around here, and tides. The strength of tides can get quite strong depending on if they are springs or neaps. So these are all things that you need to be aware of, mainly for most part purpose, is so that you don't end up working against them. I mean, your timing for departure is always quite critical because you'd want to be at a certain point at the tide time change to make best sort of distance and passage up, say, something like Black Deep Channel, and I'll show you that in a minute. You don't want to be plugging, especially in a sailing boat that's only doing an average speed of about 5 knots anyway. Even a 2 knot tide will put start putting a lot of time on you if you catch it wrong. So these are all things that you sort of build into your plan, and you can use this as a rough idea of how long it's going to take you to actually get to a point and then, catch tides off to places like Ramsgate, which is actually manageable in a sailing boat inside a day. So, and it gives you access to the coast of France, Belgium quite easily from there. So it's a good routing point if you're based in this area, East Anglia, Suffolk, Essex, etc. So what I do first is just show you. You've got two little buttons down the bottom here. You've got route and menu. The route covers, you get an automatic and a manual. I always use manual, and you can build your route from A to B with all your sort of waypoints in between using that. The other thing that you need to do really before you start doing any routing is to go into the menu and change it. Make sure that your boat speed is set for a reasonable figure. If you put in too much, that as you build a route, the calculation is going to be completely wrong, and your distance times are going to be incorrect, really. So you want to put, hang on, I'm going a bit fast here. So you go menu, and you get this list of options. Under boat settings, you get your draft setting. That don't really need to worry about that. You get the cruise speed and the fuel consumption. So you can change your fuel consumption if you're a motorboat and you know what your usage is on average per hour. You can set that, and you can see the fuel consumption over X amount of distance, and obviously the cruising speed you'd need to set here. The units they give you are kilometers an hour, knots and miles per hour. Just make sure that you set that correctly for what you want. So I've got knots in there, and my average boat speed is, believe it or not, about 4.67 knots. You're likely to do faster than that. However, you've got to take into account your average over the period of time. It's going to be points when I might be like, I don't know, against the tide or coming into harbour and that sort of thing. So yeah, so 4.7 knots, I've got that selected, and as I said, fuel consumption is 1 litre an hour if you're using your engine a lot. However, I'm not too fussed or too worried about that as a sailing boat. So we head back into the main viewer and just take that right. So we're back into the planning mode now. You select route, manual, and you get your planning or your route planning window pops up, and that will, as I'll demonstrate now, that will actually show the weight or the legs of the route as you start inputting them onto the chart plotter. So I've put my waypoint for Harwich just at the Landguard North Cardinal, and I'll make my second one down here just at the entrance of the Ramsgate channel, deep water channel. So as you can see, that's just plotted a straight line down the centre, and giving me an overall distance there in the nav window of 36.4 nautical miles. And that would take me, with that 4.7 knots boat speed average, about 7 3/4 hours. But what would happen if we did do that in a straight line? Well, the first thing you've got is Gunfleet sand. If you cleared that, which I'd probably do in the draft of the yacht I'm in, it's only 1.1 meters, so I'd probably do that if it was high water. But if it was at low tide, I might be lucky if I had 0.5 meter of tide on top of this chart datum depth given. So there's a good likelihood I'd probably run aground there. Then there's the middle sunk bank. There is a small channel there which you can pass through. That's an easy one to get through with most boats. If you zoom in a little bit, you've got 3 to 4 meters chart datum there, so that would be no problem at all. and then you've got, after passing over this bank, you're into the Black Deep Channel, and then in front of you you'd have quite a monster of a wind farm. That's the London Array wind farm, and sat on the Black Deep bank there. So you've got two channels that are more commonly used for getting round this. One is actually through the wind farm, through the existing pass, which is Folger's Gap. And the other one is Fisherman's Gap, which runs slightly sort of further to the southwest. This is, well, especially when the farm was under construction, this was the main, one of the main channels for cutting round the wind farm. However, if you come in through this channel with a strong tide, and it will always be at a 90-degree angle, whether it's flooding or ebbing, it can be quite fierce across this because you've got shallows on either side. So it cuts across there, right across this channel, and it's even with a reasonably powerful engine, it will slow the boat down quite considerably, and a lot of cross correction made for keeping a boat on track through this channel. So yeah, so after getting around the London Array wind farm, you're almost clear of navigational hazards up until you approach Ramsgate in the Deepwater Channel. It's worth knowing that you have got the notorious Goodwin Knoll or Goodwin Sands there. So if you are in reduced visibility, that is definitely something you don't want to be running into. And the Broadstair Knolls can be quite lumpy in a big sea. If you've got a strong southwesterly and it's whipping round North Foreland with a tide in the other direction, that will be quite uncomfortable. So these are all things that you just need to bear in mind as you're considering doing this passage. So what we can do now to avoid some of these hazards is to start inputting what I call dog legs into this route. So I feel quite comfortable with heading up to the Medusa Can and then making a dog leg straight across to, say, the King's Channel, or even I might even be tempted to do this one. As you can see, I'm inputting this first waypoint, and then I'm selecting it and dragging it around the chart, and that's what sort of makes this quite easy. And you can see that the navigational submenu is calculating the distances and times as I'm doing that. So, and it gives you the individual leg duration. It's better doing it this way, I find, because it means that you can keep an eye on the overall distance of the trip. Sometimes if you start off without doing an A to B first, you can start putting unnecessary dog legs in, and when you've finished, you look at it and you've got way more legs in the route than you need to, and it looks an absolute mess. You'd be changing course every 5 seconds, so that wouldn't be practical. So I'd head round the Gunfleet Sand, and then I think we could probably time the beginning of the flood tide, say here, and that would take me nicely sort of down the East Swin King's Channel to the crossing point for Middle Sunk Deep Channel crossover, and then in even reasonable course for the entrance of the London Array wind farm there. Might want to dog leg that just a little bit because it can get quite shallow there. And there is a very specific routing for coming through this wind farm as well. So as you can see, I've just plotted through the wind farm there. The beginning is a safe water buoy just on the north side. It runs through the wind farm to a second safe water mark. and then the water buoy to the safer water buoy to the south is for the exit there. Now that puts, as you can see, I think we had 7 hours 45 minutes initially. So by putting these dog legs in, and that's a reasonably safe route now, you can see we've added an extra, well, nearly 40, that's about 40 minutes onto the trip. But bearing in mind that by the time that you're turning from waypoint 2, your boat speed is likely to be a bit more than 4.7 knots because the tide is then with you. So now the departure time isn't going to be from Landguard because you've already set off. So you need to allow, obviously, for your departure time from your actual mooring buoy or pontoon, wherever you are. I'd always allow about an hour and a half maybe to get to your actual start point. And that way your times of the route that you know are going to be accurate. If you arrive here half an hour late or an hour late, you know that you've got to then think, well, am I going to make the tide turn here? Am I going to make Ramsgate for the time that I want to arrive? And if I am going to arrive an hour late, will the tide have changed? Will I be plugging against it, etc.? And that also goes for the wind and the weather. If you know you've only got say 11 hours of good weather before a storm hits, then you want to make sure that if you do depart too late from your mooring buoy or mooring pontoon, if you're 3 hours late and you think, oh no, that's okay, I've got plenty of time to cut across here, but have you? Because if you look at the weather in your plan, that means that you could arrive on the onset of a gale or a storm, and trying to make entry to a port such as Ramsgate in, say, a strong southerly could be quite interesting for you if you're not prepared for it. So, and your crew's not prepared for it. So that's just a kind of brief overview of the Navionics free chart viewer. You can play around with this all you like, and obviously, as I said, it doesn't include things like tides and weather. So yeah, always use proper sources of information for obtaining that.